me I say, now your fault be that. Ah. Oh. Uh-huh.
Lagos, the most populous state in Nigeria and the largest contributor to the national GDP at 18%, is also one of the few states in the country that has a detailed and structured budget made available to the public on their website. It follows then that a well-defined system of accountability be instituted in the administration of the state for proper evaluation of revenue and service delivery.
We need to meet our leaders, our legislators, our local government councils, because they themselves, now we put them there, and we get the constitutional power to bring them back. If they don't do what we want, let them do for us. We are tired of no lights, no electricity, no good roads, no good water. We need to stand our ground. People of Lagos,
one of the cornerstones of an open society is a government that is accountable to its citizens, and good governance cannot exist without proper accounting practices that entail the acknowledgement and assumption of responsibility for actions and decisions.
SAVI is one of the suite of programs that DFID rolled out to help the Lagos State government in the reform process that they began. But for the first time in the history of the work that DFID does, this is the only time that they consider having a program that works on the demand side. Most of the time it has to be from the supply side, supporting the government, the MDAs in delivery of services. And then the SAVI program is to look at how we can bring voice of people into the government agenda, how the citizen can also demand accountability from the elected members who represent them, and from the various service delivery points, how they can have access and also have input and also be able to demand for accountability for better delivery of services.
To facilitate processes of accountability in governance for the impact to be real in Lagos State, the State Accountability and Voice Initiative, SAVI, engaged the Lagos State House of Assembly to help the legislature live up to global standards through capacity building and strengthening of the institution.
The House of Assembly, being the first elective representative of the people, they come from the ward where they were elected from. They are representing constituency, and by constitutional provision, they represent the minds of the people. They provide the legal framework in which everything happens. They are also meant to look at issue of appropriation, which address the needs, the goods and services that are being provided. So they are the first categories of people that we feel that it's very important for us to help them, support them, so that they can be able to perform their oversight function, their lawmaking process, and then their representative function.
That's been wonderful. They've taken us through thin and thick, and I really cherish the partnership. It has been positive, because we have been exposed to modern techniques, particularly in budgeting and in oversight function.
We have other arms of the media and the civil society organization. SAVI brought all of us together. Not one time, not two times. So that the legislature can be accountable to its constituents through the media and the civil society organization. I think we have had so many workshops, seminars together in that area. So I can tell you without missing words that when they first came, there was the initial resistance of the fact that nobody wants to change because the excuse is not far-fetched, except you know what will come out of that change. The resistance was there, but we were able, I spearheaded it, that they must come in, and they came in, we're all enjoying it now.
The partnership was also instrumental to the restructuring of the operations and staffing of the Legislative House.
SAVI was on us that we should have a Legislative Service Commission. We now have one. And the advantage of that is enormous. Before now, we can just come to the office and we'll get the news that our head of legislative arm has been transferred out of the house. And somebody that we have expended a lot of money on and exposed to several trainings in legislative matters will be transferred to another ministry. Because then, the legislative service was subsumed in the civil service, and the control is with the head of service, and the head of service can wake up in the day and say it's transferring somebody away from here, and we don't like that because we feel that we should have control over our staffs. We know them.
Officers from SAVI have displayed a measurable sense of responsibility, which indeed has helped us to really know what indeed is our mandate and what is expected of us. They have organized a series of training programs, which I believe have benefited a lot of the staffers of this organization. And these training activities are a continuum. And recently they did one for us, and which every one of us really enjoyed. There was never a time that SAVI will mount a training program for us that will not have one thing or the other that will have added into your intellect, which of course will help you in discharging your responsibilities in the service.
To actualize its mandate of ensuring good governance, SAVI employed strategies that brought civil society organizations and government agencies together to form partnerships to further the delivery of good governance to the people of Lagos State.
We have two types of partnership, advocacy partnership we have those that are issue-based, those that are issue-focused. For that, we have two. We have issue-based advocacies that look at the issue of climate change. So those work with Ministry of Environment. Then we also have the people with disability, which look at the issue of social exclusion, and then look at what can we do, and also look at some issues around gender. So we have this partnership that look at how can Lagos put in place a policy that address these people with disability. Toward the partnership, which is Partnership for Good Governance. This is different from the other two. This is a partnership that works with the local government, looking at budget and planning.
The coalition of the civil society groups was encouraged to engage the government of Lagos State in a way that entrenched transparency and accountability in the system.
We've had engagements with the House of Assembly. Some joint work plans were developed in constituency relation building. And one of the first things we did was a constituency office mapping in 2011. We're going to proceed with the community's perception of that, but the constituency office mapping was done in all the 40 constituencies of Lagos State. We got all the addresses we could from the House of Assembly to find out how adequate and how functional those offices were. Publications were made, we submitted to them, and in addition, Because of that, on their request, when we met with the majority leadership of the House, they actually asked us to present a bill on how to institutionalize effective constituency office in Lagos State, which we have done earlier last year. That has been submitted and is presently in the House, still being drafted before being presented formally at the House of Assembly. So that we think will be a major breakthrough in establishing strong legislative constituency relations.
In the past, I have never seen a government agency or ministry calling CSO organization that, please, oh, you people should come. The issue is like the issue has changed, the system has changed. I think that even the system of organization that we have in Lagos State has made things easier for us. Since they are more transparent, we also became more transparent. We also became more open to learn from them what we don't know in the past. So thereby, we'll be able to work cordially, and at the end of the day, we achieve greatly. They now have a new thinking. They now take their job even more responsibly.
Across the country, and in particular Lagos State, the effect of climate change is beginning to have a grievous impact on human development, as well as social, economic, and political life.
We have produced quite a number of policy briefs, for decision makers and also for other stakeholders in Lagos. As a matter of fact, we have about 3 in a series there. Aside from that, the most important work that we've done at the level of policy in Lagos State is a framework for policy response to climate change in Lagos State. This is something we are happy that we're part of, and this is something that we did in collaboration with the State Ministry of Environment, and we're happy to say that this is part of the document that the State Ministry of Environment is working on, along with other documents that some other consultants have done, to come up with the appropriate policy for the state. This project I've just mentioned is actually a flagship, for the partnership. It had the process of the project had all the partners of the partnership taking part. We had people from the academia, from the manufacturing sector, from the government. We had wide-based consultation, in putting together the document, and it's a material that we have also shared and given out to people, especially for feedback and validation. It's not the policy, but these are suggestions on how to go about putting the policy together, and what are the policy options for a state like Lagos State, an emerging mega city, a coastal city, particularly a city that do not have, Lagos State do not have as much land as you would expect for the kind of population that it has to cater to. So some of the challenges that comes, especially those that are climate related, are some of the issues that disaster risk management for a state like Lagos State, for instance, is one of the things we looked in. How do you feed the kind of population that Lagos has? How do you address urban development, water, access to water and sanitation in a state like Lagos State? How do you address coastal erosion issues, the issue of ships abandonment? These are issues that are critical for the state, and they are issues that we are also contributing our quota in raising awareness around and suggesting policy options at addressing these issues.
The Lagos State Civil Society Partnership, LACSOP, is a product of a joint venture of civil society organizations, the private sector, and faith-based organizations. Now, with the alliance of SAVI, LACSOP has helped to open up the process of governance for inclusive participation in formulation, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of policies and projects.
Now, the projects we carried out with SAVI were basically exploratory projects that we needed initially to gain credibility. Because after a self-assessment in 2010, we engaged with SAVI in 2009. After a self-assessment in 2010, we understood the perspective from which Lagosians view civil society. So we were not on a credible standing. We wanted to gain that credibility with government, and we understood that to work with government, we needed a partnership and move away from the perceived antagonistic perspective of NGOs. Now we started carrying out research projects on the budgets and in line with perceptions. So on the one hand, we wanted to understand what government priorities were in certain sectors. We wanted to understand what it is government was doing and how they were putting their money where their mouth is by funding certain sectors. On the other hand, we wanted to see how the beneficiaries of this budget perceive government's accomplishments. So we were marrying two different groups that ordinarily will not come together. That's because we understood that in Lagos State, as with many parts of Nigeria and even African countries, there isn't that connection between the citizens and the government. So we wanted to bring that glue that will merge it. And we felt the first step to do this was by carrying out research projects on perception and budget analysis. And that is what we did.
Citizens Impact Appraisal, where it was decided early that the LACSOP, being a forum of civil society networks and coalitions, to gain credibility and legitimacy, one of the things we need to show the government is that we have credible data when we're engaging with them. And so we decided to focus on key sectors: education, health, poverty alleviation, and infrastructure, because these are major areas where the government actually has a lot of budgetary intervention. And so the idea was to engage in citizen perception surveys and budget analysis so that we have cogent information and evidence to present to the government when we're discussing with them. So one of the things which came out of that is we had in 2011 the surveys, community perception surveys in education, about 6 local governments, and also in the health sector. And of course we had the publications after that. And with those publications, those were the evidence, the arrows by which we could actually engage with the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health. As a result of those engagements with the Ministry of Health, the Commissioner of Health actually remarked openly that his perception of civil society changed, and he saw them as partners which to bring on board, and that led to the formation of the independent watchdog system in the Ministry of Health, which is known as the Community Health Sector Forum today.
The Partnership for Good Governance, PAG, is another SAVI-initiated partnership in Lagos State that was forged to cause a constructive change in the way governance is carried out, especially at the local government level.
We are working with 3 local governments in Lagos State. We didn't want to work in the whole local government in Lagos State. We said since we have 57 local governments in Lagos State, including the LCDA, let us make a start with 1 or 2. Then if it is working out well, we can scale up to other local governments. So we started with 3: Ibejuleki local government, Etiosa local government, and Amuwodofi local government. So we made sure that the stakeholders, the council managers, we will know that we are going to be releasing more with, and the chairmen of this local government, they were present at the activation meeting. We also had the Local Government Service Commission, which we know that they are in charge of everything that has to do with local government. We invited them for the activation meeting, those from the Ministry of Local Government, everything that has to do with local government. We let them know that yes, a partnership have come to assist them, to be part of what they are doing, to see that things work out well.
Working in partnership with local governments poses a novel kind of challenges in PAG. More so because the local government councils across the state do not have uniform structures, and the operation of each council is attached to the apron strings of its state government.
Local government area is a very difficult terrain to work with. The most very difficult. I can say this because local government lack formal structure that you can actually engage with. And this structure is what gave the partnership the toughest time to identify who are we going to hold responsible, even if we engage these people from this angle. So we have to go into what we call series of analysis, and we develop a problem tree. So we know those people that are likely threats to us, those people that are likely their strength to us, people that we know that these people will not help us in one way or the other. So immediately we identify those groups, we now try to develop a work plan that are targeted at these primary stakeholders. And that is why we came across that in the local government level itself, we pick some people that are critical stakeholders even within the local governments themselves. That is why we come up with the management team of the local government chairman, the council manager, the council treasurer, the secretary to the local government, the HOD budget, because these are the critical portfolio. Though some are political, some are administrative. So those ones that are career officer, we know that when we engage them, they don't know to what extent will you be able to hold them responsible for their action or not. So we discovered that there are some other agencies that we need to engage if we must work with the career officers at the local government level. So we identify those agencies also, we have to engage them as well. And we are talking about the Service Commission, the Ministry of Local Government, the Office of Transformation, the Head of Service. So all these groups, they were very critical to PAG, to engage with. So we got them on board, then we started working with them. Now the first thing we did is to do advocacy visit to all these critical stakeholders. They are very relevant to the success and achievement of PAG work plan.
There is ability in disability, they say, but this can only be fully utilized when conscious efforts are made by the society and the government to make the lives of people with disabilities inclusive rather than specialized.
Processes that discriminate against people with disabilities, institutional processes like when you are registering for, for instance, you want to travel by air and you want to fill an online booking, and you don't see any provision in the form we have to fill where they ask whether or not you are a person with disability. In other words, that institution is blind to your disability, so it doesn't recognize that that person is disabled, that it can have passengers that are disabled. The same thing with our electoral process. INEC registration process, voters registration is also blind to disability, because they don't ask you, are you a person with disability? And since they don't ask you all these things to know whether you are a person with disability or not, they cannot provide for you. The institution will not provide for you. INEC will not provide voters cards that blind persons could use, or that deaf people could use, or whatever. They will not provide interpreters for the deaf at polling stations. They will not provide the materials that blind people can read, like Braille, maybe like what do you call this, ballot papers that are prepared in such a way that blind people can use. So then if you go to the hospitals too, you also realize that even when they're asking your address, your name and all that, they don't ask you, are you a person with disability? So that they will know from your records that, okay, you're a person with disability first and foremost. And probably whether or not your other medical health challenges that you have come to complain of is an offshoot of that disability. It's only when the doctor now sees you for the first time that he now knows that you are a person with disability. But with your records, they cannot detect. You understand? So institutionally, a lot of our institutions, even educational institutions too, it's just now that Lagos State, after the passage of the law, that they are trying to, be inclusive. But before then, you don't have schools that provide instructional materials that are accessible to blind or deaf or other disabled people. You understand? So these are some of the issues we identified at that meeting, and that's why we now the social model says that we should identify the individual and then remove the social barriers, attitudinal, institutional, environmental. When you talk of environmental, you talk of buildings, roads, pedestrian bridges, transport systems that are not accommodative of persons with disabilities. You cannot use those on wheelchair, for instance, cannot use the conventional buses. The BRT buses, those on wheelchair have to be carried in. You understand? Buildings are not accessible. I'm talking of environmental barriers now. Buildings are not accessible, even to the blind or to the deaf. Not talk of those on wheelchair or crutches.
The Lagos State Civil Society Disability Policy Partnership came about primarily as an initiative of SAVI to remove social, attitudinal, institutional, and environmental barriers that form limitations to the progress of persons with disabilities in Lagos.
As the name implies, we are into disability policy advocacy. So our major thrust is to get favorable policies passed for persons with disabilities in Lagos State. But so in 2011, Lagos State government signed the Lagos State Special People's Law, and that was a major highlight for LCSDPP at that point. Because the advocacy has been on since the inception of the partnership. Even before the inception of the partnership, other civil society organizations had sent in the bill, and just before the partnership came on board, the process towards the advocacy was very slow due to capacity and lack of resources. But when LCSDPP came on board in March, they sent in memorandum, position letters, position papers, advocacy visits. So the tempo got up. So from that on, the Lagos State government started making then the House of Assembly passed the initial bill, sent it to the governor, brought it back. So there was tremendous progress. Then finally, in June 2011, the bill was signed by the governor. So that was a major highlight for LCS. Aside the passage of the bill, we are also involved in policy advocacy in private organizations. We're not just looking at the public sector, now we're also looking at the private sector. Make sure that the private sector are also inclusive of persons with disability. Making sure policies in private sector are inclusive. So policy advocacy has just gone beyond the public sector. It's also in private sector, making sure that their policies are inclusive of persons with disability. We also do media advocacy. Just last year, we trained the members of the Nigerian Union of Journalists on disability reporting, knowing fully well that the strength of the media, media practitioners are the ones who shape the agenda in the society.
Partnership for Voice and Accountability came into being because SAVI saw a need to bring all the ideas in its various partnerships together. It saw the media's focal points in being an agenda setter, and thought that if it introduced a Voice and Accountability program, which is run by the media, people can be able to bring all the energy together and be able to communicate what is done in SAVI to a larger group of people. For example, in the case of persons with disability, the PVA can now do a program on the challenges that a person with disability faces in Lagos, for instance, because the PVA is based in Lagos, for instance, and talk about the daily challenges that this person has and put a face to what other people do not know is happening. So the PVA is actually to reinforce what the media, what SAVI is doing, and project this to a larger audience.
The SAVI model of approaching development work as practiced in Lagos State has not only established a new template for civil society engagements in the state, but has brought about a paradigm shift in government and in civil society circles. The trust level has risen between government institutions and civil society organizations who prior to now were perceived as antagonists of government.
There's been a lot of training over the past 1 year or thereabouts since the whole thing began. There's been quite a number of meetings, and yes, there have been trainings, and those trainings have been very, very impactful. I would say one thing though, that much of what SAVI has done is to help us put in perspective some of the experiences that we've had over the years, things that we took for granted but we just didn't even know that they were of any essence. So bringing all of that together from the different angles and culminating in one training or another, experience workshop or another, experience sharing workshops, facilitation fora, all have come together to help us to be able to come up with programs and projects that people will not be able to argue with.
By and large, I am proud to say that as a clerk of this Honorable House, I would say that SAVI has been of immense assistance to us, and that is why most people regard Lagos House of Assembly as the primus inter pares. It's not because we are doing it on our own, it's because we also have the support of SAVI, DFID, and some other agencies of international connections.
If you look at our procurement law now, it's a law that can be introduced to any of our houses, and it is a law that will catch the purport of those founding father of the idea. You know what I'm saying? And it was one of those advantageous part of our relationship.
What we have learned so far from this process is that some other organizations that were in the partnership have come up with some other new ideas that were not hitherto in my own organization, which I feel that is good for us to take the work of the CSO forward, and that is what we've been doing all along. So all the engagement that we'll be having on that partnership is a learning process for everyone and for each organization.
People and constituents are gradually being brought into the centerpiece of governance. To this end, the executive and the legislative arms of government in Lagos State, at both local, council and state levels, as well as functionaries of government institutions, are eager to engage and to be engaged by civil society organizations in a bid to deliver quality service to the people.